All right, we're live. We're live. We're just waiting for a couple of guests. We're going to see if it's working. We've got James here. Hope the sound's okay. We just want to shut down all of that. We're waiting for Keith. A couple of others. Let's just see. I'll just send a message.
Just going to get my drink.
Yeah, go for it. I mean, this is how we roll. We just wait for people. Just close the door. We're going to just want to check the settings. Yep, good. Lighting looks right. Fingers are staying there crazy over there. We're live. Oh, Zeb's here. Hey, Zeb. Zeb's here. See, wait. Hey, Zeb. Zeb, this is my friend James McClure.
Hey, Zeb.
Zeb, just tell us how we're sounding. We're waiting for a couple of others that to join us. Yeah, James, you might just want to do a little bit of talking, and I'll just see if Keith and then Zeb's there. He's waiting. Let's just see if anybody.
Meow. Woof.
This is all being recorded. We're waiting for D. Let's see if he, because we're live. But maybe let me just invite. Maybe I'll just add another link. Copy. And sorry, this is such a Zeb saying, "Hey, James."
Does it sound all right?
Yeah, and people say we're going to edit stage. Yeah.
I just want to see, how must I hold set my phone like this?
No, the other way. I don't know how we're going to get more on stage. Meet James, meet Dewald.
Hey, Dewald. James.
Hello.
No, yeah.
Like that.
Yeah, Zeb's here. We're just waiting for Keith. I've just sent him a link.
Just a second.
Got that sexy reel-to-reel, Dewald.
Which one? That one.
Which one?
This thing is confusing me now. Kijk, that side.
There. What's that one behind you?
The Atari.
The Atari. What's going on there with the Atari?
I'm sitting on the floor here by the rack.
All right.
To make it a bit interesting. Otherwise, I can't sit outside because there's just too much mosquitoes.
Oh, yeah, you're there. Yeah, Zeb says the sound is good, yeah, because we were worried about feedback and stuff because I've got the little feedback mic and stuff.
Yeah, no, I'm doing this for now.
Yeah,
sounds good.
Yeah, we don't have feedback from you. Nothing. Don't worry.
Okay. And the big.
But if you don't, just so you know, this is the first time, because this is new. If you go into StreamYard, and I'm just going to quickly show you, so you can go into settings where you've got camera. Then you can go audio. I'm just showing you, and it'll say your default microphone, your speakers, and then you can go echo cancellation, reduce mic background noise, and automatically adjust mic volume in StreamYard in the settings.
Yeah, there's audio. Echo, yeah, it's all activated.
Keith is here too. We're adding a third. So James, we're gonna. Oh, hey Keith.
Hello, man.
Hey, man. Oh well, we're James and I are gonna have to swap around. But James, maybe.
No, but we can. In. I think everyone can see us though.
No, they can't. This is looks on screen, right? Let me just try. Yeah, that's better.
Okay, but then I can do this.
No, you can't.
If we do, yeah.
All right.
That's better.
All right, so let's do some introductions here. I'm very, very happy that actually we've connected a couple of places tonight. Keith Jones is Mr. Viral Generation. Man of just films, talent, music, everything else. James is one of the most wonderful trumpet players that was born in South Africa, but he's currently living in Amsterdam. Has played across countries, and Nick Pantazi is there. Sorry, I've just got to watch the comments. Hey, Nick, lovely to have you here. And Dewald is the main person that we just talk transcriptions, we talk reels, we talk anything that needs to get fixed in this country, including some of us flying to sort out turntables or reel-to-reels or tapes, and Dee's the man. So yeah, Keith, I'm gonna just you don't have much time, so I'm gonna just let you just start off and maybe chat a little bit with James and whatever, and it's just wonderful to have a group of people here. Thank you very, very much, everybody, for being here.
Well, I'm always happy to join you for these streams when I can. It's been a very busy day for me, but I'm happy to see these guys and all of these things. The contemporary situation of jazz and trumpet playing and contemporary music in the Netherlands, and also doing music transcriptions and working with analog equipment are of great interest to me. So I'm happy to hear what these guys have to say too. And I'm happy to discuss anything that you would like, Stefan, as always.
Sure. I mean, James, just what do I say? I mean, talk a little bit about your experience, what you've been doing, and from Morocco through to, I mean, Keith, I think it's really, because when you were speaking about BCUC the other day and some of the musos that and what you've traversed over the world, James has been sort of traveling, through Morocco and Europe for the past couple of years. He's got his horn here tonight, his trumpet, but maybe you guys chat a little bit and just talk about music. And
sure. I mean, maybe I can start by actually saying how I ended up meeting Stefan. There's a mutual friend of ours that's living in Cape Town, a trumpet player, Keegan Steenkamp. And I wanted to link up with him and just listen to some music and, hang a bit and share some stuff. And he told me, I'm actually hanging out with this other guy and he's got some great records, some nice sound. Maybe we can go to his place and go listen to some stuff. So we rock up at Stefan's place, and after unlocking like 3 gates, we get to this little room in the back.
40s, yeah.
And it was just piled up with records and CDs and sound gear. And I was like, where are we? And he was busy transcribing a record. And like we were watching over the process of him doing it. And then we just sat for hours listening to records. And it was just, the start of a good relationship. And we've been chatting ever since. And I love beautiful sound. And I think that's also what's more than like, I mean, it doesn't matter if it's, what is music? You don't have to go on that road. But just sound in general is something that I've always been, I guess, really drawn to. And it doesn't matter if it's a record or if it's live sound or, just being out in nature and listening how that all turns into music, all that sound that's around you. But yeah, that's kind of how I met Stefan, through the curiosity of sound, I guess.
It's how I met Stefan too, really, and it's a very easy thing to spend hours listening to records at his place. I know because I've done it myself, and it's a very pleasurable thing to do, obviously.
Yeah, and I feel like I always learn a lot. Like I'm a musician, and that's what I do. I focus on my instruments. I focus on composing. I focus on the sound of the compositions in the band and concepts and whatever. And when I sit with someone like Stefan, I feel like he shows me a whole other world, which is it's like an encyclopedia of a whole bunch of records, and not just records, but like how certain records are connected, or how certain genres shifted, or how certain genres can be linked, or certain countries, or certain people. And it always opens me out of like, whoa, I didn't know that, or now I have something else to check out that's super old or really fresh. And I mean, you guys know.
Actually, Keith, just going to interject. It's amazing tonight because I was talking to James about, we had a whole sort of American and Nick's there or not, that whole thing about how hip hop and punk collided more so in the US than the UK, beyond certain other things that we've discussed. And I was talking to him about the Beastie Boys, and I mean, James's music is just out there. He's playing, I mean, from anything, you know, and we can talk about that afterwards. But you know, we were playing something the other night with some Beastie Boys, but, you know, I was kind of explaining like the relevance of albums like Paul's Boutique and the production and how that whole thing came through, you know, and you know, this is where Keith is. I mean, Keith's been in and out of this country over what 25 plus years, you know, and you're traveling the world right now. You know, you've been walking the streets in Morocco and playing with Moroccan musicians, and you know, you've been in Amsterdam and you've been playing here with Garth Asmus, and you know, what sort of music are you playing? You know, it's just this collision of, you know, the connects, and you know, a lot of people are not getting that, and I'm particularly moving this stream because I'm feeling that a lot of Africa at times is marginalized, you know, in terms of the political correctness or how people see us. So, you know, Dan, just talk a little bit about, you know, what you've been doing, you know, like yeah, just, you know, how you got out, what you've been doing, what you've been playing, your different bands and all that.
Yeah, Spotlight. Okay. I mean, let's just say I grew up classically trained trumpets. First bands was playing in ska, reggae, punk, dub. Then started playing with DJs, whatever. Studied jazz in South Africa. Was playing a lot of festivals and not just jazz, but still like some Balkan stuff, klezmer stuff, punk, reggae, dub, all of that. Whatever there was going, as long as it was live music, I was very excited to play. And yeah, went a bit down a jazz rabbit hole because I thought that's a very interesting music to check out. And when I was, like 2015, I was on a tour with one of my bands called the Nomadic Orchestra at the time. And
who is in the Nomadic Orchestra?
I was.
Was it Chad?
Yeah, it's a South African-based band playing like Balkan.
No, but wasn't that with what's his name, with Buddy?
Buddy?
No, not Buddy. I'm sorry, with who was in the band?
Oof. Marlon Witboy, Joe Bolton, myself, Javi de Toy, Greg Abrams.
Okay, all right. Confusing with something else.
Sorry, a lot of names now. But anyway, I went with it.
I saw Nomadic Orchestra like 10 years ago in South Africa, so I know who you're talking about.
So that might have been me. There was I was in the band for like 4 years.
Nick, by the way, Nick is a ska musician. I'm just gonna.
Yeah, still love ska punk. Jeez, I mean, the whole reason I got into that music is there was a really big scene, live music scene when I was growing up, when I was like 16 to 18, of all of that music. And it was like, you could go to a gig and you'd hear a reggae band, a ska band, a really heavy metal band, and everyone was just like hanging out together. And like that whole mix of scenes was such a beautiful thing.
It's funny that you say that. It's almost word for word something that the late George Bacon says in my documentary about that scene, where he's talking about the early ska punk scene in not just in Cape Town but across South Africa, generally in the late 1990s. It's exactly as you said. It's that there would be like always one of these ska punk bands that had sort of a jazz leaning, always a reggae band, sometimes a metal band, sometimes a grunge band, but all these scenes were just overlapping and interacting with each other, which was a unique thing, I guess, to South Africa in that time. And it also seems to be like it was slightly before I started going to South Africa and working there, but it seems like it was a very fertile, joyous time for going out and for hearing live music into the early 2000s.
We're adding Dan as well.
Yeah,
welcome Dan the man.
I know
another music.
A lot of friends, but much later.
But yeah, exactly. That time was beautiful, and like George and his band Hug Huggity Hug were like a huge influence for me. Like one of the first things I ever transcribed was a song by them, Just a Lie, and that was the first thing I transcribed. My cousin gave me a CD, and I was hooked. And later, I ended up actually touring with them. I did like 2 or 3 tours with the Hugs, subbing for the trumpet player because he couldn't make it. And yeah, that was like a dream come true for me, you know, like I grew up listening to those dudes, and then I'm sitting in a van like chatting with George and, you know, checking what books he's reading. And yeah, so that was a big highlight for me in my life at the time, for sure. And yeah, really cool that you got to interview him and speak with him.
Yeah, it's just such a cool documentary.
I saw it with all those bands. I was making that film like I don't know, 12 and more years ago, 12 to 15 years ago, because it took me several years to complete it. But that sort of period of the Hogs and 340 Mill and the Rudimentals and all these bands was something that was like the center of that film. They were like the middle section. And so I spent a lot of time, I spent years hanging out with those guys, and I always enjoyed myself greatly.
Amazing. Yeah, I think maybe I was a bit too young to meet you then. But yeah, I can't believe we didn't cross paths, actually. That's crazy.
How old are you now?
I'm 32. Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, what was I trying to say with all of this? Basically, I ended up touring with a Balkan band, Nomadic Orchestra. We were in Germany, the Netherlands, Belgium, and I had such a good time that I stayed. And I ended up enrolling in a conservatory there in Amsterdam, where I studied a degree in jazz performance. And yeah, that's where I've been the last 8 years. So I started there in 2015, finished in 2018, 19 with studying, and I've been there ever since. And yeah, it's been really eye-opening to, more than anything, you're in the middle of Europe where you have musicians coming from every corner of the world. And it's just incredible to, yeah, to just meet such an array of people, become friends with people, and then they take you to their home city, and then you're playing gigs wherever. It might be in Finland, Spain, France, Morocco. I mean, it's one of the best things I've done for that reason. Like, just, you know, expanding and meeting people from other parts of the world, and yeah, visiting their home countries, getting cooked food by their grandmother or mother, and then being able to play 3 or 4 shows, you know, like, yeah, that's like bucket list stuff for me, just to be able to go around meeting people and pick up flavors from all over.
In your Morocco story.
Oh, yeah. I mean, Morocco was, yeah, it was a challenge. It was a challenge indeed. For the first like 3 weeks, I was really struggling just to figure out like how the country and the culture flows. And I really found it difficult to like sink in and like find people that I could hang with and like learn music from, because at that stage I was like Gnawa crazy. And all I wanted to do was just sit with some people with like Gimbri and Krakeb and just like play, you know. And I found myself in the city of Essaouira, which is kind of the hub of where Gnawa music is happening. Right. And I was like desperate. I was just like going to every restaurant, like just, and there's people playing everywhere, you know. Everyone's got these krakeb, and every walk you just hear that. And I found some guys, and eventually I ended up going to their place, and we started playing. I don't know, it was like past midnight or something, and we just played for hours. And it was the experience I was hoping for, you know. Like, I mean, Gnawa music is the whole transcendental space that they get into with a krakeb and these repetitive bass lines, and that's what I wanted, not just like what you see in the restaurant, but like what they actually do and how deep they actually go. It's like that point where there's a ceiling and you think you can't go any further, and it just blasts through that, and you go another 2 hours, you know. Like yeah, I'm very grateful for meeting those guys, and that they opened me up, and yeah, made me play for 4 hours, you know. It was great.
Yeah, Keith, it's just amazing. It's just like thinking about sort of the history of this country, and I'm going to get Deval talking a little bit later with James, because James has quite an obsession with particularly with mastering. And that's another story. But then also because there's another working musician who's playing in another great band called the Shweta. And Dan's played a lot with Steve Newman, all of that. I mean, just he's monstrous as well on his own. But we will get to that. But it's just to kind of get this going, in terms of just this whole South Africa relevance of music, and you've been such a pivotal part of documenting it, because I don't think that there's many that are documenting the global connects like yourself and a couple of others, in terms of what you've done, so that's why I just wanted to say, hey, like just, jump in. We've done a couple of streams together, but I'm just very grateful that everybody's here.
Well, no, thank you for saying that. It's obviously, I was always very deeply drawn into and connected to the music world in South Africa. Basically, from the first time I ever went there, I was going out and hearing music pretty much within days. Within the first week I was there, and I never stopped. And for years and years that I spent in Johannesburg, going back and forth between Johannesburg and Europe, most of my friends there were musicians. And most of the people that I hung out with in West Dean and the areas where I was living in Albertsville and Sophia Town, all musicians, and also those areas all had a history of being centers of South African jazz and South African music going back decades. So also as centers of resistance through music. So I was always surrounded by that culture every time I was in South Africa, and I learned a lot from it, and I took a lot from it, but I always tried to give something back in terms of connecting those people also to a more international awareness or more international manner of doing things, and ways to just to connect people to people, like what Stefan is doing now, I guess. But I did it through my films, and I also enjoyed it.
So, Keith, how's your week been?
Hectic, busy, because I've been editing. I've got since we're talking about South African connections, I'm doing all this stuff in about 3 weeks with surviving members of the band National Wake, which was a band from an earlier generation of South African punk and reggae interactions from the early 80s. They were doing it when every single thing they did as a band was illegal, from where they lived, where they practiced. Every time they got on stage, they were in violation of the law. So their music is infused with that spirit, which is incredibly powerful, but they were also phenomenally good musicians. And so it's one of the bands that I turned up in my work that has had a very strong resonance and connection abroad. People always relate to them, both to the story and to the music, and to the warmth of the individuals and the people involved. So I'm doing some stuff with the 2 surviving members of that band here in Prague in a couple of weeks. And Ivan Katie is coming from the States, and Steve Money already lives here in Prague, Czech Republic, as I do myself. And my former business partners from Johannesburg are coming from Berlin, and my cameraman's coming from, I guess he's coming en route from Albania. He lives in New York, but we will have a whole sort of Punk in Africa reunion here in a couple of weeks. So I've been working on getting that together, and I've been editing my current project, which got me deep into a reggae mood, listening to my friend Johnny Temple, who's the bassist of the band Girls Against Boys and Soulside, but also the publisher of Akashic Books in Brooklyn, New York. And he got started in sort of cultural distribution. He was saying the lessons that he does with his book publishing company now is stuff he learned working as a teenager for Ross Records in Washington, D.C., which was at that time the main U.S. distributor of reggae vinyl, and both Jamaican and UK vinyl of every reggae band that was active in the early 80s. And Johnny sort of learned his tricks from that. So I was actually editing this little piece of material where he was talking about learning not just the music business, but the business of distribution of culture, from basically the combination of being an artist on Discord Records, doing punk music in the band Soulside, and working as a part-time job for Ross Records in their mail order department. So that's what I mean. I've been immersed in this stuff all week. That's what I've been doing. So.
That's amazing.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah, please.
Go for it.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you, what South African music is sort of like cutting through at the moment, either the stateside or Europe, that you're aware of? Like, what is pushing?
The stuff that I've been working with more in recent years, more than that older punk stuff, has been really experimental and avant-garde electronic music, especially electronic music from rural areas in South Africa or from more marginalized linguistic groups that's not necessarily part of the house music mainstream within South Africa. So in South Africa, a lot of those artists are less well known than they might be in Europe or in the United States. And
Like
a large part of that is also that those artists all control their own distribution channels and operate primarily online and don't really engage with the remnants of the traditional music industry in Johannesburg.
Amazing.
Especially Pretoria, Atteridgeville, that side of things, and also with Popo. So that stuff works extremely well, whether it's amapiano or more, I don't want to even call that mainstream, but more known genres, but also much deeper stuff like Bacardi House coming out of Atteridgeville and different forms of tribal electronic music from rural areas. That stuff has immediately a big connection to audiences in Europe because it's so interesting and it's so unique and it doesn't sound like anything. And it sounds deeply traditional and completely futuristic at the same time. So people are just amazed by it sonically. They're really drawn to how the music plays in space and with space and is both computer music but also somehow traditional in nature. That side of South African music is really fascinating to people, especially here in Europe. When I was in the States last spring, in North American spring, so like a year ago, I several times walking around Washington, D.C., I heard South African house music coming out of bars or places just randomly. And I was really happy to see and to hear that I'm not the only one who's paying attention to this stuff, that it actually is out there in the world in distribution.
Amazing.
Quite amazing.
And
Go for it, Dan.
yeah, sort of like Black Coffee and people like that have obviously become huge in the mainstream, but this is like something else.
You would think that. Black Coffee will get booked to play at Summer Stage in Central Park or something like that because the people who are booking Summer Stage are more keyed into this more mainstream, more traditional world music sort of industry, which I'm not putting that down. It's really great the work these people do and that they get this stuff out of Africa and into the rest of the world. But that's a totally different channel than what I'm talking about. I would be talking about stuff that would have started with like DJ Mujava and DJ Spoko and Pretoria stuff from like about 10 years ago, and then folding through Shangaan Electro from a few years after that into sort of the stuff that, for example, Brian Shimkovitz, who does Awesome Tapes from Africa, puts out now. And that's like mostly also stuff from the Pretoria area or that side of things, and Swana speaking and Songa speaking artists.
Amazing. Incredible.
Yeah, it's kind of weird, like since I've kind of got into this sort of YouTube space, and obviously what's been happening, in Cape Town and in Joburg and that, but also just wanted to remove myself a little bit while I kind of sort of synthesize stuff. I've gone very, very deeply into a lot of it, beyond my classical and that kind of stuff. I mean, Dan, I was showing people the Michael Garrick album that I found on the weekend when we were together. It's absolutely incredible. It's poetry, but it's just out there. But that's not my normal. But I've gone deeply. I'm getting back into like house and techno and all of that. And it's interesting because this is here, and he's big into sort of that whole, he's in Israel right now. It's not a great place to be. We all know what's going on there, wanting to get out, but just talking about that, he's like, we just like get back to like to craft like an electronic and a rotor, and then you sort of go back into sort of the sort of techno house, all of it, and for me, I just kind of at the moment, I'm kind of in love with the machine music, that I listen to daily, which is not the norm, but it's kind of like a part of my own sort of healing process, or just sort of getting out of it, through what's going on in this country right now, which is, and I've encouraged everybody to vote in this country right now, but also that we can buy, because I think we've got a body of music in this country that will be a book that will be as large, if not larger. I'm not comparing, but like Jamaica, it's just incredible. From those that went into exile and those that stayed behind,
All right, completely. Actually, I'm just remembering now, Stefan, the very first time I ever came down to Cape Town and met up with you and saw you, I had just come from Attridgeville, hadn't I? I had just been shooting with Spoko and Machepis and those guys in Attridgeville, and I think I was totally on fire and like couldn't stop talking about the music that I had heard there, like going into these shebeens and these all-night parties in an informal settlement, like really marginal, obscure places within South Africa, but the music was killing me. I remember being in your house in Cape Town and being unable to stop talking. Thankfully, I finally did actually make some films out of that experience and got to share it with people. It wasn't just talking in somebody's kitchen. You're right. Like when you discover that South Africa is an endless mine of no pun intended, but it's a wonderful mine of very rich resources that I think people sometimes sleep on a little bit in South Africa. They don't realize how great and how rich and how wonderful this can be, and how it's a language of communication that people anywhere in the world can understand and relate to.
Absolutely.
I was just going to say, it's interesting because it seems like, the point about sleeping on it's quite pertinent, because it does seem like a lot of the time, a lot of the electronic music you hear, especially in Cape Town, is quite mainstream and it kind of misses it a bit, and often hear people say, wow, when I was in Europe, I was hearing much more cutting edge music from your place than when I was actually here. So it's kind of interesting, huh?
That's completely true. The stuff that you will hear much more South African music and more cutting edge and more avant-garde, interesting South African music in Berlin or in Washington, D.C. or in Brooklyn or in Paris than you will ever hear in Cape Town. And Cape Town is also a kind of conservative, although it has its own really wonderful music heritage in the Cape Flats and in the Cape jazz tradition and in Cape Malay choirs and stuff. That's all wonderful music. But in terms of electronic music and sort of popular genres of music, Cape Town can be really conservative.
Yeah, interesting.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting because I'm going to let James talk a little bit after this, but I've also been talking to a couple of musicians. It's quite sad at the moment that the average DJ, and it's the same old, is being paid more than a musician in Cape Town right now. And there's certain musicians that are actually earning more money from teaching. And we've got such a bubbling senior, but there's something that's just not, and there are so many working musicians in this town, that, right? But I mean, how many, clubs open, they close, and there's a bit of this, but that, we don't have a single. Well, talk about is there a large venue right now that you could recommend besides the Commons as a small venue?
I mean, I've only been here now for 2 months.
Yeah.
And it's kind of difficult because the last time I was here was 2 years ago. So for me, it's kind of hard to come in and figure out everything that's going on. But for people playing original music, it's always been a bit of a problem. There are a few spots. But
I'm not asking Dan because he lives here. I'm asking a person who's come in. So what are those spots?
Okay, so I mean, of course, you have the Commons in Muizenberg that's become very popular.
Yeah.
Great. I think
great venue.
If you go to Langa, Kwasek, that's also another spot.
Langa is one of the South African townships. I'm just for the other people who Keith would know. Yeah.
Yeah. Other than that, I immediately get a bit blocked. There's some spaces, the Athletic Club and Social, which I've never been to for some reason.
Fancy, but yeah.
And you have Selective Live that's doing some stuff.
Yeah. Chimarenga is okay, but the roof is terrible. I mean, it's just like a tin roof.
Yeah.
Huge. We have some of the biggest bands playing.
I think they're doing stuff in this 196 Victoria, which
Yeah,
is
yeah,
now
yeah.
called the Listening Room.
Yeah. That's the place in Woodstock. Yeah. Connor's place.
And then I'd have to really start thinking. I guess in Norduk you have a place, but I don't know if that's a proper
that's
venue.
Allison's little
The Norduk Village.
Yeah.
Cafe Roo.
Yeah. So
you have Cork Bay, also the Olympia Cafe.
Yeah, actually Paul's doing some okay stuff there. Not too bad. But small. Again, small venues.
Yeah, small venues.
Dan, anything you can add to this? I just want to get this venue thing out of the way.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. Like when you talk about venues, there's also like the idea of a scene versus just a venue where people come in, pay, watch something, and it's very sort of like organized and leave, or a place where people hang out and sort of cross-pollinate. And in a way, that's what I feel is lacking. Like a place like the Commons is a place like that where people cross-pollinate, and actually it's a kind of place where a band might start because people are hanging out and chatting, and they will spend a night there chatting, and things actually come out of that, which is different to just a venue where people come in and just have a dinner and leave, or it's just like a ticket and leave. So I think there's a lack of that in Cape Town. The Commons is the only real scene I can think of, maybe Selective a bit. But I think for original music, I think jazz has a little bit of a foothold in some venues where, but I think apart from that, there's not a lot of space for original sort of like experimental music. There's no particular, I think it's pop-up. It's a kind of pop-up culture which is happening now, which is cool. But I think I just hear stories about I don't know, before my time, but there was a place called The Base in Greenmarket Square. I don't know if you guys...
The Base, I mean, that's just legendary.
Yeah, so when I hear about places like that, I get like really sort of like, I wish there was, I mean, we had the Zula Bar in Long Street, the first Zula Bar back in the day, which was quite cool, very cool. But I think personally, the idea of a place like the Base where you could get these like people from all over and people from like different backgrounds all mingling and hanging out the whole night and smoking pipes in the back together and getting up to mischief and doing all sorts of stuff and forming bands and talking, that's interesting. And I think that, but when I talk to my mates like in Brooklyn or wherever, they have the same kind of story, that those kind of spaces are less now. It's more sort of like I don't know, slightly more conservative in their approach. Maybe it's a money thing. It's just businesses are run different. I don't know, but yeah, that's my 2 cents. I'm not sure what you guys.
We've got the mainstream stuff, like Kirsten Bosch and all of that, the international stuff. But I mean, I'm talking, because I'm talking about local musicians. Where is there space for local musicians to grow in Cape Town? And it's a couple of small venues, and a couple are dying. And this is what actually kind of worries me, But at least the people still keep making music and they still keep gigging and all of that, So
we used to have a place called the Mercury, right? It's the Mercury Live, and I just think that when that closed down, like suddenly you've lost like where do all those bands play? Like where does like a punk ska band play? There's like I don't know, So if you lose one particularly like sort of important venue, suddenly you've like got quite a big hole in the scene, and it's probably takes a lot to start something like that up. I think the Armchair in Obs is going again, which has been...
apparently it is going quite well.
Let's hope that, let's support it. Let's do something to support our economy and to support this, local music. I think it's very, very important.
But that's always the biggest thing. I mean, unfortunately, a lot of musicians are going to be part of the audience at a lot of events that are happening, and I think that someone can correct me if I'm wrong, but like my opinion is that you have so many people that are working as musicians and they need to eat, and that means that they take certain gigs which are very much commercial gigs and corporate gigs, and that takes a lot of time and a lot of energy, and you need to be like in that zone as this person who does this thing. So people aren't focusing so much their energy into their creative projects, and I feel that the people that are focusing their energy into creative projects are maybe doing something on the side, and then they're not playing so often, but when they do a show, it's like they're all in. But they are, I mean, they are a minority. There's a huge majority of the musicians who are just not part of a scene. They're not coming out to, to play original music, to support original music. I mean, people, of course, are, but not in big numbers. Not like I haven't been to Johannesburg in years, but whenever I see videos of what's this venue? Bass.
Well, baseline's closed.
Untitled
baseline.
Basement. Untitled Basement. Yeah.
Whenever I see a video there, I feel like the audience is like heaving. You know?
Yeah. Joburg audience is fire. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
I've,
actually, I'm going to throw it to Diop because he's based in Gauteng, you know, and we're going to get to the recording later. But you know, you get out there weekends, okay? You know, obviously some large gigs, you know, but you've been working with quite an obscure. Your mate's has got a slightly obscure band, you know. Just let's hear a little bit about Gauteng.
The listening to how you talk about the little obscure venues. There was a place in Greenside in Johannesburg called Mama Shabine. That used to be a hotspot. Keith, you might know the place.
I was there.
It was, yeah. That was a hotspot for interesting live music, and that closed down. And I'm not one that gets out much. So I have to confess that my knowledge of the scene in Gauteng is extremely limited. But at one stage, Greenside was quite bustling with small little clubs and venues and bars where you could see quite interesting music. And what I found, if I may voice a bit of a broad scope observation and opinion, is that the general people out there, they're lazy. They'd rather go and see something that they are comfortable and familiar with than being daring to go and see something new or something off the beaten track. So I've got these mates of mine that they've got they've got an interesting genre that they play called, I think, sludge metal or like punk doom, very heavy, dark music, which is not rooted in African music at all. They're extremely popular in Europe. They tour Germany and Prague and the Netherlands, and they used to tour Russia a lot. Yeah.
It's not rooted in our music either. It's all actually rooted in American versions of blues forms from West Africa.
Yes, yes, absolutely.
Stoner metal, it's really slowed down, really heavy, super emphasis on the sonics. But that's a great example of a really small niche subculture, but which is totally international and totally open in terms of its directions. You'll find a very small but very dedicated audience for that kind of music pretty much anywhere. And maybe it is bigger in Germany or Denmark or somewhere like that. But it doesn't surprise me that you have bands like that in Johannesburg, because there was always that type of audience for more experimental or more seriously played rock music in Johannesburg and in Gauteng generally. I think that fits. That makes absolutely perfect sense to me.
When I arrived in Gauteng, this year marks my 10th year in Gauteng. I followed my friends around to their gigs that they play at the sludge metal outfit. And they played some really interesting, dingy spots. And they shared the stage with other similar bands. There was this, referring back to the commentary about a scene, there was this little underground scene that moved around through the city, either in Johannesburg or in Pretoria, and it was great fun. If that's your thing, if that's your type of music, then it was just an absolute blast to be part of that.
You actually now that I'm thinking about this, your comment that it's not really rooted in African music. There is one band on that scene called Byzantium. I don't know if you've ever heard of that band. No. I think they're from the United States. I don't know where they're from exactly. But they mix Ethiopian music and Coptic music with metal.
Wow.
It's also like extremely slow, heavy music, but it has this spiritual and almost like an Albert Eiler kind of quality to it, but expressed through heavy metal. And it has very immediately recognizable East African or Coptic sounds to it. So there are bands that influence from African things even in that side of music, which is great. I mean, that's the wonderful thing about niche music, that it will always like keep multiplying into interesting and weird and very new hybrids.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I think one aspect of the sludge metal doom type music that the band my friends play is that it's trance-like. If you can connect that to tribal music, it's got trance-like properties. There's apparently a professor in Prague that did an experiment with one of their tracks that he reckons has the ability to put you in a trance-like state with the aid of some substances. It was quite interesting to hear that, to hear the story from the
Prague.
band
Prague,
leader.
He's in Prague. I mean, like what goes on in Prague, this happens in Prague. I mean, it's why I'm just so enamored. I've got a great pressing plant there as well, a record pressing.
Yeah, it's the following for this band is actually so big that there's this little cult group that got established there in Prague, which is a great homage for a little band from Pretoria.
Absolutely. What's the name of the band?
Wow. Rough Magic. RUFFMAJIK. Rough Magic. And I produced the first 3 albums on tape. Where's the machine? On tape.
Amazing.
Yeah. Incredible.
And just to also talking about weird and wonderful bands, I've been speaking to another friend of mine. Wonder if I can name his name. Cesare Casarino is a fantastic jazz bass player, and they've got a experimental jazz trio that plays the Joburg scene, quite underground, undercover. They don't want themselves being featured on social media or YouTube or any of those places. So I said to him, okay, well, then we have to record you to tape. If you want to go really weird, record you to tape, live to tape, and get the master tapes to Europe and press some records and get you into the weird scene. That's the only way for the band to survive.
James is so. I'm just gonna just take a little bit of a diversion because we've got a bit of an audience. So that's small, but whatever. James is Dan's got some stuff out there. Dan, your stuff's on Bandcamp, correct?
Yeah.
James's stuff is not. James is Jonathan. This is where I'm throwing it at you, is because James is obsessive about mastering and all of that. You sitting there behind those reels and the tannoids and all of that, and I know Mr. Westman's here. Steve is just like there's questions coming. I mean, that's why we've just gone slow about this. Steve Westman would really be intrigued with what you've got there and what you've done, talking about certain studios that you and gear and all of that, and there's just so much that go. But I'm going to just take a little diversion right now because we just want to test how it sounds. James, pick up the trumpet and play like a one riff.
Oh,
come pick up the trumpet.
Sorry, guys.
Just hear what it sounds like, and then we just maybe play it in that direction because we.
Yeah, if it's really loud, just tell me for a second. It's okay?
Good.
Okay.
How did that sound?
That sounds nice. It immediately made me a bit nostalgic about hearing Hugh Masekela's music the first time at Bob Studios.
Oh wow.
Mr. West in the audience. We don't even going into Bob Studios tonight, D. Mr. Ghost in the team. We're not even going into Bob Studios tonight. That's going to be another story.
Yeah.
You know, and also, you know, Keith, you know, just also because, you know, some of the, we're talking about, you know, hip hop, you know, and prophets of the city and their relevance and all of that. It's just like so much. But, you know, it's just actually quite amazing to just actually get a group of people here, you know, and we're sitting kind of at least across the globe, and we've got other people there, and you know, and James has been, you know, trekking across, you know, different places from Morocco through whatever, you know, and your recordings are in, you know, and you might want to talk a little bit about mastering, and I also want Gewalt, you just talk about what you're expecting in terms of your recordings, you know, because I mean, I got some of James's recordings, and we want to try and get them out there, and we're going to put them on Bandcamp. I think it's a good way. Obviously, eventually, everybody wants vinyl, but it's expensive. But, you know, just talk about your thing in mastering, because, I mean, I do not think those things, I think there needed to be a vinyl master for the curve. But, you know, your whole mind is just in terms of perfection, you know, and I want you to just maybe chat a little bit about that.
Well, firstly, I'm not very experienced in mastering. I would say that I'm experienced in hearing sound that resonates with me. So when it comes to technical matters, I can't always articulate what it is that I want in a master or something like that. But I've just found that with a lot of mastering that happens, it's so often that a recording almost gets I don't want to say damaged, but it's almost to that extent. You can have something that's so beautiful, it gets recorded, and it's raw, it sounds really beautiful.
Yes.
And then, of course, you go to the mixing process, and hopefully they mix everything, and it's sounding a bit better, and everything's mixed. And then there's this last stage, which a lot of people just see as someone coming and you polish it off, and that's it. And I think, I don't know, a lot of people don't pay so much attention to the mastering, especially if they don't have money and they can't afford an engineer to do a proper job. And I've heard so many, it could be CDs or especially vinyl. I heard it so much on vinyl that I listened to an artist's like just the digital WAV, and it sounds pretty good. Then I listen to the record on vinyl, and it's like, it's just not the same. It's like the quality of the recordings are not there. And then I'm kind of sad in a way that I have this record. I'm like, this is an album I really enjoyed, and now I've got it.
Yeah.
But it seems like they just compressed everything.
I just want to just add to that is yeah, and Steve, Gevalt's going to answer your question afterwards. I just want to get through this in terms of these gear, because it's quite amazing. But for me, what's interesting is I saw a recording, and I'm not mentioning any names, but there was a recording of a particular artist here in South Africa where I said, let's lay it down to tape, right? Let's actually take it and lay it down to tape. Okay, and what happened is it landed up where the tape never had, okay, and it landed up in a Dolby Atmos mix. And for me, I was actually sorely disappointed. I mean, it did not have that essence or that feel of what at least what I grew up with, like where I feel it, yeah, you know, where I feel it. And you know, everyone's been through the whole mobile fidelity thing, and you know, the digital, it doesn't matter, you know. But there's something about, you can take something to analog, or you can kind of warm it, or you can play it, or you can use DAW or whatever. But I don't think that the Atmos mix did this recording justice, you know, and it's just, you know, it also is who's in control of the industry, who's controlling things. You know, that's why I do like Bandcamp. I think that at least artists are able to at least control some of their own, you know, to a certain extent, you know. And, you know, I mean, Steve Westman will talk about some of the big labels. I mean, he can get anybody there on his show, from Michael Fremer to Chad Catton, you know, I mean, Steve is just like anybody who's anybody will jump on that show, you know, and I respect that people. There are people that criticize me, you know, Fremer's some good time and he knows his turntables, but not everybody can afford that. But I mean, I feel that there's an essence to recording, and I just know my gut feel at age 57, it's like what I feel, and I feel that there are people like this or people here, or what is Keith mostly listen to vinyl, or Dan has his passion in vinyl, you know, not that we can all afford the best sound system. Some of us have got better sound systems than others, you know, or whatever, but there's something we feel, an essence of the music, of how we feel it, because at the end of the day, it's music, you know.
Sure. I was going to ask, oh, sorry, I just wanted to just ask if you guys know the album, The Floating Points with Pharoah Sanders.
Yeah, it's very interesting because there's a turntable that came from here that landed up with floating points. You know that album very, very well.
Yeah, because he actually mastered it himself, and he actually went and did like I don't know if he did he studied mastering especially for that reason that we're talking about. And if you listen to that album, it's quite amazing because it like peaks sometimes, which some people would probably find offensively peaks, but it actually kind of cuts through it's almost like punk mastering in a way. It's like the highs and lows are, I don't know, I think it's quite interesting.
Well, yeah, I mean, I'm not going to go into it. I mean, again, Mr. Westman would, you know, his show and a couple of other shows have done with it, but there's some people that prefer the new sort of down television's Marquee Moon, whereas others prefer the original pressing, you know. I mean, and I met Richard Lloyd here in South Africa. I never met Verlaine, but, you know, where it's got that piercing kind of sound, and now it's been kind of toned down a little bit. It's not as harsh. There's been a lot of debate about that. You know, I don't and can't afford the new remaster. One day I'd love to hear it. But for me, it was always that album that just like like I sit, you know, and especially me with my tubes and single-ended approach, hearing that piercing kind of thing, and having been in New York with CBGBs and understood that is that piercing kind of sound that came at you. But, you know, everybody's got sort of different tastes in how they hear things. But I tell you, it's nice to own an original record that's still actually in good shape. That's what I think.
I just wanted to point out, Staban, that everything you're saying is correct, but part of the reason that people prefer original sounding records to remastered ones is often out of nostalgia or just how they have self-conditioned themselves to hearing that music and getting used to hearing it. I don't know if you have heard the remastered, completely reproduced version of Tim by the Replacements, which sounds far superior in every metric to the original Tommy Ramone produced version from 1986 or whenever that came out. But I still prefer the original mix because I'm so used to it. I can't listen to those songs and not hear them in that original mix, even though it's dated. And it sounds like a mix from 1986 by a producer who overproduced the record. It's all of that. It's admittedly that. But it still sounds great to me for what it is, because I want to hear that record the way I heard it as a 16-year-old or as an 18-year-old, because it has special meaning and special depth, even though it's not technically the best sound in terms of its production. And I can admit that newly remastered version does sound much better across the board in every way that you would describe how the record sounds. It's also a double vinyl. It's a beautiful reissue. But I don't know, it doesn't sound like the way that I expect him to sound. And I think a lot of these debates, what you're talking about with Marquee Moon or with the Stooges record, with the Bowie mix versus the Iggy Pop mix, that stuff is more about how people got used to hearing those records in the first place.
I just wanted to say, I'll try and type it. Keith, I think, you know, and if anybody's watching here, you know, our friends from especially stateside in Canada, that is the most poignant way of looking at it. Is I think it's our nostalgia, but and I'm sure, you know, and Westman, you know, and there's been Fremer and Mazzy and a couple of other people in how they've raved about the new Marquee Moon. You see Steve's. And Westman's system, I'm actually just going to pop it up. I mean, and Keith, the way you've just said it now is like the answer to so much conflict that's happening around remasters or whatever, you know. And I mean, I'm a huge replacement band, and also solo the Westerberg. I've got the CDs, you know, what was it, Granddaddy, and it's just amazing music. But I think you're absolutely right. I think we're so conditioned in a certain way, you know. And it's the mono versus stereo debate. But I think you've really nailed it in that actually we've got to accept that the original is not always going to exist. We need to move with the remasters. Keith dropped out. Hopefully he'll come back. We need to move with the remasters. And, you know, because this is what people have been debating, you know, the new versus the old. You know, I'll sit there with like an Ella mono, live in Berlin, my late dad's favorite. Hopefully Keith's going to come back. Because he's got the same link. He might jump back in anyway. Let's just see. Yeah, you know, it's very, very poignant. Dewald, you know, just as a little bit of a diversion, and I'll see if I'll pop Keith another link on WhatsApp on my phone, which is on another network. I think Steve's very interested in your gear, so let's give you a little bit of that. Talk about that.
Yeah, I can quickly point out the gear, but I'd love to just give a short summary also on the mastering thing. But let's look at the gear quickly whilst you're looking to get
the full doors and then afterwards. Yeah.
Original Tannoy Monitor Gold 15-inch speakers that I got them late in December 2022. My first own real set, and I got them by an absolute luck shot. I couldn't believe my luck getting them. So the original Monitor Golds, and they are just lovely, and they've got an excellent lineage in the music industry for being highly respected studio monitors and mastering monitors as well. Because these speakers are just, I always love to use the term cinematic. When the temperature's right and when the vibe is right, they open up a sound stage in front of you that is like larger than an IMAX screen. That is just fantastic. And then behind me, let me just see which way. I'm sitting on the floor. Not the best choice for me. My legs are hurting badly. Atari MX50. 1/4-inch 2-track open reel machine, X-Studio machine, being taken care of very well now these days, and just a DAC. A Technic CD player that's made in Germany, not in Japan. And then some of my own equipment that's either tube-based or transistor-based, and my trusty old Lynn Sondic. Up there,
I mean, people don't know that you build gear and you design gear, and you know, one or two pieces that you've done here, and that also you've done some major refurbs and other stuff to my turntables. But you know, and you're also in your work, you know, the EMT and you know the Sondic upgrades that you build yourself, and the phono stages and all of that, you know, and the transcription work that you do, you know. But I mean, this is just an intro into the Ghost in the Machine, who I would not have survived certain audio headaches without Dewald. I mean, it wouldn't have infected you, and it wouldn't have infected Keith and Dan and other people if it wasn't for Dewald.
Okay.
Yeah, gosh, yeah. We go back a couple of years, me and Stefan. Many years. many years. Yeah. So may I quickly dive into my little mastering lecture that I've been giving for quite a number of years now. It's short and it's simple. And in my opinion, modern mastering is misunderstood, and it's overrated. It's overexploited. And one must always remember that when you go out to make a recording, the recording engineer that's responsible for recording, whatever it might be, piano solo, full band, or orchestra, voice, spoken voice, whatever, you need to record your source so that it is as pristine immediately there where it goes to tape or into digital. This idea that there's this phrase that we'll fix it in the mix phrase, that's nonsense. If you cause damage or clipping, or if you capture too much of the room ambience, or capture too much of the instrument and not enough room ambience, get it right there at the moment when the magic happens. There's so many recordings out there that you can go and listen where the signal clipped, and once it clipped, you can't go and fix it. Well, these days I believe there's AI plugins that you can remedy some damage that's been done during idiotic recording sessions. But that's, if you don't have access to that, or if you don't want to engage on such a level with that kind of remedies, then do it right the first time. You've got plenty of time to do it, unless it's a live performance. We are time limited. And then, secondly, it's up to the mix engineer to do a mix that will hold its own without the aid of a so-called mastering engineer. And one must not forget, and this is probably the most important bit, the original purpose of a mastering engineer was to get the master tapes ready to be cut to lacquer discs, because a lacquer disc has certain limitations that you have to respect. And that's the original and most important purpose of a mastering engineer. These days, digital, if you're streaming, modern DACs can handle fantastic high resolution. Modern speaker systems can handle fantastic dynamics. So you can have way more dynamic music going out digitally than what you can press to a vinyl record. So again, an overzealous mastering engineer that goes and compresses the life out of your out of your work that you've spent months creating, it's a punishable crime. So, when you choose a mastering engineer, you have to choose carefully, or you actually have to ask yourself, do you need a mastering engineer?
Testing a new way of making somebody big. I'm learning StreamYard.
Hello. Yes, I see myself now.
But so when you say that, do you need a mastering engineer? Do you mean that you just leave it mixed and that the mix is good enough?
In my opinion, in my experience, if you have a decent and very competent mixing engineer, the person responsible for producing and assembling the whole album, if you stick to a couple of very simple and easily executable rules when you mix your either a track or a full album, then a mastering engineer, a capable mastering engineer, must come in and really just feather light touch the album. But if you take your album to a so-called mastering engineer that's going to dive in there and compress the life out of it, that's one of the first things they do is compress it so damn hard, and that stems from pop music that you want to have as loud as possible on the radio. On old FM radio or AM radio, those days are past. We're past that. We're past having the pop or punk or whatever rock music as loud as possible to play through a little speaker, a 6-inch or a 5-inch little speaker in a car somewhere or on a kitchen table.
I don't know. I mean, what about these kids who just have got like one little Bluetooth speaker?
Those little speakers are equipped with little limiters, so they take care of whatever you stick through them. Don't worry about that. It's the other way around these days. Just like let them sort out themselves, but leave the good stuff on the recordings. You know, leave it wide open and dynamic, and the highest highs and the lowest lows, and you know that you've got space to play. Leave it there. It's been proven over the decades. I've got some albums here behind me that was recorded in freaking '74. If I can just grab one here. Some knows this very well. Other people don't know it at all. Midnight Sugar. This was, when was this recorded? What, 74?
On the back.
Gosh, why can't I find it now?
I've got that.
Anyway, recorded to tape, still relevant, still sonically relevant. Sounds fantastic. So why not? Why not do it with modern music? There's, you know, you mentioned that there's some albums that you listen to that's overcompressed, and yes, it takes the life out of the music. It erases the spaces in between, because music. Sorry.
Just repeat that. I didn't quite get it.
It erases the spaces between. Because music is composed from, you know, as much as you want noise there, you want some quiet bits in between to make it all make sense. And if you limit the space between the noise and quiet moments in music, you're squishing the life out of it. You're moving the texture. You're removing the color palette. And it ends up being a mishmash of noise.
I think some classical music is the most difficult music to reproduce and play on vinyl because of some of those silent passages and also how busy it can get. Yes. And there's nothing as terrible as listening to classical music that's been mastered. I remember at one stage there was a series that the sales pitch was they mastered it for listening in cars, in vehicles, where they squish the dynamic range so that you could hear everything, and it's just terrible. It sounds congested. But then again, if you go and listen to Rudy van Gelder's recordings for Blue Note, we made good use of valve compressors. Yes.
To make the music quite enjoyable, you know, compression has certainly got its purpose, but be extremely careful with it. It can be a tool that you can that can cause a lot of damage. That's difficult to undo.
Yeah, you know, I've heard, you know, and also it's the whole debate in the classical versus the jazz world about, you know, originally, like everybody that was moving like high-end classical was looking for the original stereo presses, and then in jazz they were looking for the Blue Note monos. And I mean, I've actually sold and moved across both those sort of type pressings. You know, I do know my dead wax for people, you know, as a bit of a curator. And I'm starting to kind of change opinion now. You know, that some mono classical that are highly revered recordings, if I've got that and I've got a mono cartridge, it sounds fantastic. There's a debate about the Beatles. Steve's going, thanks, Steve. Thanks for joining us. Yes. Steve Westman, thanks. But it's a case of I think things are changing. You know, it's like, you know, I mean, I remember speaking to the later Tim the Paravancini. Yes. Yeah, from here to Japan, and then, you know, through here, Luxman, and then onto EAR. And he always used to crap on me when he was, God bless his soul, that, you know, when my typos and my ADHD, if it wasn't proper spelled grammar. But he told me about, you know, some of those you know, the lacquers and stuff that came here from the UK, you know, because of EMI, Echo, all of that. And we had some great pressings back in the day, you know, and you can go into the dead wax and know that it's similar. And I do know that certain sound great. I mean, you find a really, really decent South African, if you can't find the original OG UK, original South African mono press of Beatles at a certain part of time, it's going to be a great pressing. It was a heavy piece of vinyl.
Yes.
That's what
Absolutely. the thing also is there was wonderful investment in quality equipment back in the day in the country, and there was some passionate engineers that made the best use of the equipment. So I own a lot of South African pressed records. That sounds fantastic. I can also add that the archiving work that I've done between late 2020 and early 20, when did I end with that? Early 2022. A lot of the stuff from the old Gallo archives, the master tapes, had just mind-blowing audio quality. Just expansive, wonderful dynamics, and recorded locally. Yes, on fantastic equipment.
Yeah.
And Stefan, I'm just thinking a thing I want to just add about the mastering and this remix thing and about reissue albums. Sorry, it just struck me now, because it ties up with the archiving work that I've done and the question about mastering and reissue albums. Is one must remember that if you're going to reissue an album, if you're either going to remix it or remaster it, you have to ask yourself the question: was it done on the same equipment chain than it was done when it was first issued? Because if it's not, if you exclude one single piece of equipment that was not present at the original mix or the mastering session, it's going to sound sonically, it's going to sound different.
I'm just going to add to that because it's quite important. And not everybody here is going to understand, but some of the people that know me in this community are going to understand. That is why, for me, as much as people may moan, the electric recording company, Pete Hutchinson, and when they bought that lathe, that original Neumann lathe, etc., that came out of Abbey Road or whatever, and the whole tube mastering process, that they don't remaster, they just get tapes, and I've know some tapes. They started with classical, they've done jazz, they've done some White Stripes right now and other stuff, but it just goes straight as it is through the tubes. All right, and those records, and they only do 300 at a time, and people moan about it, and I haven't heard one, but I've had some dealings around that. I believe that is true to the process. If somebody wants to pay for that, it's like the next best thing to, like an original, print that's a numbered print or whatever, and some people want that, and people bitch about it. But I mean, you've made a point. It's about like the process and staying true to the process. And I think in some way, from what I've read and what I've watched and I've communicated, that they stay true to a certain process. They get the tape, it gets through that old Neumann thing, whatever, and all of that equipment.
Yes.
There's no remastering or whatever. Okay, and it's straight cut, to a lacquer or however it was done back in the day, and that's it.
Yeah. But I wanna just interject here and say that should they? Sorry, should they cut a lacquer of an album that was originally cut on a Scully lathe, then cutting it on a Neumann lathe changes the sonic properties. So, you see where I'm going with this, is if you want that original sound, you have to do it on, it's got to be so perfectly set up. You can't deviate from the original chain. The album is going to sound slightly different. And that's why I see hi-fi enthusiasts a lot where they moan and bitch, like you say, when they buy a reissue vinyl disc, and I say, this doesn't sound like the 1971 pressing that I bought way back when I was a teenager. Of course, it's not going to sound the same. It was mastered and cut on completely different equipment, regardless if it came off a DSD digital file or even if the company is so lucky to use the original master tapes or a second generation tape or whatever. It's going to change always.
Yeah, it's just actually. I think we've just got to, I don't think there's any one of us sitting here today, and this is interesting compared to some other folks. I don't want to own more than one pressing of any record, unless it's something, maybe a couple. And I've given up some originals for others, and I've kind of let that go. But there are people I know that might own like 15 copies of a Led Zeppelin. All right, and I'm just like, what's going on? But I understand the enthusiasm, and I've been through it, and I've been through those pressings. But that's not me.
Yeah.
I've got a top shelf of certain things. Already. I mean, owning nearly 10,000 albums, half in storage, is this is too much. It's just too much. You can't live like that. But that's me. And there we are. You've got a fair share of records as well. Keith, I've got actually a question to ask you, because I think Dan will be interested. Have you got an original National Wake press?
Yeah, I have one.
Okay. How does it sound to you compared to what Matt at Light in the Attic did? I took the original as a kid.
With that, I think the Light in the Attic, first of all, it's a completely different record. It's a different release. It has much more material and a different track listing and different songs. Maybe a closer comparison is the original National Wake vinyl that came out in 1981, and Benji Moody's CD reissue in South Africa, which is closer to the original. And I think all of those things sound different, but they're all fine. National Wake were also not a complicated band to record and to master their record. It was all done by Graham Handley at Satpel Studios, so it was done properly in the first place. It sounds good. It sounds good on the original. The Light in the Attic is a lot of material on the Light in the Attic reissue that is remastered just from cassettes or from live recordings or from other sources. It's really a different issue. Although it has most of the original South African record, it's kind of a completely different thing. That's a weird example though, because it's sort of a different release. It's not a direct reissue. The Light in the Attic reissue is a compilation that is an expanded version based on that original record, which was withdrawn from circulation.
Oh, it's such an amazing fact that we're having that tonight, and I mean, we get a little bit.
I don't have a copy of this. There's only two of them that are known to have been made. But Steve Money, who's my neighbor here in Prague, has a test pressing of the original National Wake 1981 recordings, and they only cut two of them. And I guess the other one went to Graham Handley or stayed at Satbell, and Steve has the other one. Even Ivan doesn't have it. So that, and I haven't heard how that sounds.
Why don't you get your transcription man to at least let Steve to do a transcription of it, so maybe we can at least hear it at some stage. I mean, I'd love to hear it.
Steve has all those cassette tapes of the Safari Suits and all that old Cape Town punk stuff. Steve is sitting on a majestic haul of old South African music going back to the 70s. Original pressing, unopened vinyls. He's got a whole warehouse full of stuff that nobody even knows about. You should push him on it. Because
you passport, get your ass off to Prague, eh? Listen, so just so you know, so James's stuff has not been released yet. We're sitting bubbling. We obviously want to get it on vinyl. I want to just hand the floor over to Dan a little bit to talk to you about a Shweta. I've had the privilege of, and unfortunately not going to the gig, but Dan's worked around people like Steve Newman, and they play a gig at his mum's house in on the Garden Route, and I just want to hand it over to Dan and just talk a little bit. And Dan stuff Bandcamp, so I can post links and all of that later. We also want to get the stuff out on vinyl, but Dan, talk a little bit about what you've done. Come on, man, we brought you up.
Yeah, well, I mean, I'm actually more interested in hearing your guys' knowledge. I'm just, I'm not particularly that interesting, but I actually wanted to ask you guys some questions as well.
Talk about your music.
We play like a band's called a Shweta, and we play like sort of a psychedelic guma dub funk jazz soul genre, skiving. I don't know. It's so hard to put things into genre, but I guess we have a South African sound that's been mixed up. It's with a Cape Town sound, coastal sound. And I guess people like are influenced by people. Yeah, Tananas was a big influence on me personally, but like a lot of South African music. And yeah, I guess just keeping it sort of like based on the sort of the South African feel. But yeah, I mean, I don't really know what to say about it other than we you know, I also wanted to take it back to what Keith was saying about the electro stuff from and Tshwana and stuff, the Tshwana stuff and stuff from like Attridgeville, and just talking about a scene earlier and just saying how I think that is. Well, that's where we're coming from, is that thing where it's actually people getting together and making music out of the connections rather than sitting in your bedroom and making it, which is, I'm not saying it's better, but it's just like that's just our take, you know. And I was just wondering if that's why stuff like that electro stuff from Attridgeville and those areas is connecting so deeply with people, is because it comes out of a real scene where people are like sitting in a shebeen, drinking beers, hanging out, interacting in a real sort of like in a real. It's almost like it's like the modern blues in a way, where you're actually like letting off steam at the end of the day, getting together, and to me that's authentic. That's like a real. That's something that's like, and I think maybe that's why, you know, even like take a band like BCUC, which is like, you know, also connecting a lot. I think overseas is like it comes from a collective energy which is moving together. So I guess I admire that kind of style. You know. And I guess we try and do something that connects in that way, you know. But yeah, Cape Town is a strange place, I think, at the moment, in terms of music and in terms of the scene. And I think for any music you have to travel. It just feels like music has to travel to really have, you know, to really have life, you know. And if you stay in one place, it's, you know, this, you know, unless it's a massive scene, it's not like going to sustain you. So yeah, I think we're always looking to move around and create, and I'm just interested to hear from you guys. Your knowledge is amazing, and it feeds into, like, you know, just hearing what's going on in other parts of the world. I think is very inspiring. You know, like what James was saying about Morocco, and what you were saying, Keith, about Prague. I'd be interested to know what's like. Do you guys find scenes over there where there's actually like this sort of like, you know, I'm sure there is. I'd love to hear from you guys, like where you have people coming together in like sort of late night kind of jam sessions, places where people hang out the whole night, and as opposed to just coming for a gig and leaving. I was just wondering if, what your guys' experiences on that are like.
Well, sure. I think that there are still lots of places like that, and there are wonderful spaces where you can hear.
Oh, he's cut out. That's hopefully he's going to come back.
Do they have load shedding in Prague?
I'm on 5G. Yeah, you know, I don't even have Wi-Fi.
So I was scared that we're gonna have load shedding and my signal is gonna die. But hey, we've got lights.
Yeah, let's tell you, your room looks majestic. Just by the way, in terms of your camera and everything. Thanks. Tonight, I mean, really, it looks beautiful. There.
Sorry, I just moved from the floor to the couch now. I just can't sit on the floor anymore.
Sorry, Dan, I was cut off, but I was going to say, of course, those places exist, but not only do you have to go and make an effort to find them and look for them and connect to these communities of people, which requires a certain effort, but very often you have to create those events in those spaces yourself. And I started, one of the reasons I got into DJing and going out and playing music, and playing especially music from different scenes around Africa, was because I felt that it needed to have a space in Prague, and that people will like it, will listen to it. It's not that I'm such a great DJ or that I did it out of some egotism that I need to put myself into the equation, but nobody else was doing it. Nobody else was bothering to create an environment and do all the groundwork to present that music. So I started doing it, people respond to it. And with the acoustic punk shows that we do in my local bar, which guys from National Lake will be the next example of, but we've had people from the bands No Means No and Snuff, and of course my friends from Soulside and Girls Against Boys. I just like bringing these people and presenting these little acoustic concerts in my local because it's possible to do it. There is the space, the willingness, there is the ability to put it on. But of course, nobody makes any money out of it, not even the musicians. Everyone does it out of the love and the passion and just creating a nice utopian space for 50 people for one evening. And it takes a lot of work and a lot of effort to make those things happen at all. But in my opinion, it's worth it. I will always go out of my way to help further those things along and create those points of intersection and points of discussion between people because it's worth it. But I mean, everybody has to make the effort. The audience has to make the effort. The musicians have to make the effort. So it exists, but it's still, it's not that, it's not like it's around every street corner. You really have to put the work in, put the effort in. But you can find it for sure.
Yeah, amazing. Yeah, it's really about the people who put their soul into it that creates these things. As you say, at not much. It's not about a financial sort of like a comeback. It's really about people putting their soul into it. Which is really interesting. And that's why we've got this venue in Muizenberg called the Commons, which I think is really a template for these kind of things, where you've got two people who really put their life and soul into it, and it creates magic. People really feel it, and I think we all have to do it more, all of us.
I must say that from my point of view, and living in Amsterdam the last 8 years, the first years that I was living there, I was but I became very involved in what the conservatory jazz scene was, which meant like going to jam sessions almost every night of the week. But it was a bubble. And after a while, I realized, okay, I'm only seeing people that I see in the conservatory. And I started to dig out a bit more. And I found that not the next best scene, but the thing that I was drawn to most easily was a venue that had a lot of improvised and experimental music. And they had concerts every week. And I started attending that like regularly. And I started to find these spaces that you were asking about, Dan, that like are spaces where people are gathering, and not just the concert that people are, hanging till late and, going a bit deeper. And that's kind of how I got into improvised music, or let's say like a more free improvised music, because there was a scene for that, and not just students or people passing by, but like these are people that have maybe been living there for 5 years or their whole life. And this is a massive scene actually in Amsterdam. The improvised music scene is really strong, and it has deep roots also to South Africa. Funny enough, you have a lot of guys that are between like 60 and 90 years old that played with like Louis Moholo, Ongezi Feza, Johnny Dani, like all these guys. So there's this big link to
that's the Exile link. I mean,
the Exile link for sure. And the music that they brought, of course, was this just free music, let's just say. And that translated, and there's a very strong scene in Amsterdam for that. And
nice.
It was really interesting, because at first I was like, whoa, okay, listening to a whole night of improvised music, I walk out and I'm like, okay, I'm ready to go home. But the reality is every week I can go there and I know I'll see 15 for sure of the same faces, if not more. And that's a whole community. And that's this scene and the structure that's been built. And people aren't doing it for the money, that's for sure. People are there playing their asses off for nothing, and the people that are showing up and organizing the events are cooking food for the musicians. They are having volunteers working at the doors, and I think it also spreads out. Like a lot of people have rehearsal spaces and are trying to do stuff in their own spaces. I myself have a rehearsal space that I share with 6 people that is actually incredible. I don't know how I got it. It's just like this big open garage structure, so there's no divide anywhere. And sometimes we're doing stuff there. Like sometimes we're doing stuff there. If I have if I have the energy for it, because as Keith was saying, like, you know, this stuff takes energy. So you got to rope people in so that you're not doing everything, but people are always really excited to have a place to play and a place to, you know, let it out. And if it is a space that is, a bit more closed or personal like that, people usually show up in numbers because they know it's going to be that atmosphere. It's going to be intense listening, good people, cheap beers, or whatever you're into. And those can go on for really late, and sometimes it turns to jam sessions. Sometimes it's just a party, and
it moves away from the standards, because like in Cape Town, a lot of the jam sessions are often based upon like UCT and standard, like which kind of is like, I don't know, I find it a little boring, but I think what you're talking about is something which is beyond that, where it's more experimental and true improvisation.
So the first jam session I went to at this like improv venue, it was like called the Impro Jam. So I was like super curious, and I get there and they're like, do you want to play? And I was like, yeah, sure. And they took my name down and they put it in a hat. And this session is run by an Argentinian saxophone player, and her dream is just to like play improvised music and to spread it around the world. Like, beautiful soul. Anyway, Ada Brava is her name. And so I get there and she takes my name, puts it in the hat, and I don't know what's gonna happen. And then she goes and she has this big dice that she's made. She rolls the dice, it lands on a 3, and she pulls 3 names out the hat. And there we go. That's the evening. It's like you can land on solo, you can play with 6 other people. And
that's cool.
It was one of the most beautiful evenings that was curated, and like one of the most challenging. You know, it's one of the hardest jam sessions I've ever been to in my life, because you just get thrown with whoever. You can't like wait to be like, oh, okay, I'm gonna go now because I see that they're playing or whatever. It's like, no, it's solo, and they picked your name out the hat. Off you go.
No comfort zone.
Love improvised music, and they just want to soak it all up. So,
this is what I get is
brilliant.
Why does it take, looking at the developing world, from whatever? Why does it take so much of this stuff? And I mean, Keith, you're from North America, but you're based in Europe. Why does it take so much decent curation or an understanding of certain things? And because we're all part of a migration globally, it doesn't matter. But why does it take that these things just happen in Europe? Is it because of the social system and the governments and what's gone on and the history? And why can't our own countries, and I'm talking about South Africa, keep archives and curate things? And it's also it's not connected, and things are leaving the country and people don't know where things are. What is it about Europe, aside from Brexit, that's still keeping this all together?
Well, it's a good question. I think there's a lot of aspects to that. One, of course, that you already touched on is funding, and the fact that the government and the state in any European country will at least acknowledge and believe in the role of culture and the arts. Even though every government and each political party may have a different opinion on it, there's a common core belief that this stuff is important and it needs support. Secondarily, I think that you also have in Europe, there's such strong cultural preservation of historic monuments and historic buildings and museums, and there's such a depth of this, which also requires an enormous expenditure of money and investment just to keep that stuff up, just to keep it going. So just the simple fact that that exists means that even before you get to the support for new and creative arts, there's already this tacit understanding that everyone's bought into, that the government, like some of your tax money, apart from paying for your health care and paying for social insurance and so on, is also going to be used to pay for cultural preservation. And I don't know if the rest of the world is necessarily as attuned to that particular thing as Europe is, for a lot of different reasons. That's not necessarily better or worse. That's just the ground rules in Europe that you already have this kind of situation where there is money being spent on culture and the arts, period, as a baseline thing. And I think secondly, beyond that, I think there was so much political turmoil and repression and totalitarian systems in Europe in the recent past. I mean, in my lifetime, until a couple of decades ago, like 2/3 of Europe were dictatorships. And there's still an awareness of this among especially alternative culture and people who are inclined that way to always make that little bit more of an effort, to not get lazy, to actually defend these things, fight for it, create a little space, carve out a niche where these necessary conversations can happen. And I think that's rooted also in a very bitter and hard fought, hard won political experience. I hope South Africa will get there because their experience of it is just a little bit more recent, and not enough time has passed for all those wounds to be healed in the first place. Not all the necessary conversations about the past even happened yet. But eventually, when you get beyond that, you can see how much you've achieved, how much you've won, and then you want to defend that. And I think that's a pretty strong thing that Europe has, at least among a sizable and very aware minority of people in any European city. If you go to Berlin or you go to Vienna or to Paris, even countries that their experience of dictatorship is maybe further in the past, like in Greece or in Spain, they still feel it. There's still people who are very aware of that historical memory. And I think that feeds very strongly into alternative culture and the role and the moral seriousness that alternative culture can have.
Oh, it's quite amazing. I mean, this is we've been going on for an hour and 40 minutes, and I want to try and end the stream piece in 10 minutes time, if that's okay. It's just a myriad of you know, and I was trying to do some hashtags tonight for the show, you know, like post-colonialism, this, and, you know, again, I keep going on about, you know, not enough representation of minorities, not enough representation of women, you know, and it's just this world, and I'm looking at archives here right now, you know, and how dissipated it is, or master tapes that have been lost, and I'm sure Dewald also knows about that. I mean, we know about one particular record where there was a glitch and it was reissued and there was a problem, but it's if all of that was just kept together, you know, like every country needs a Smithsonian, if that still exists in the US.
Well, that certainly is. Actually, if you go to the Smithsonian now, if you want to get into the Museum of African American History and Culture, you have to book tickets for that 6 months in advance. It is so popular, it's so packed from opening time to closing, booked months in advance, not just with school groups, but with families. But if you can actually get into it, like the whole thing is basically like a tower of jazz and of blues culture and of the African American experience, which has been primarily expressed through music. It is a phenomenal music museum. And so the Smithsonian not only exists, they're still trying to invent new things and keep going into new fields, new directions. So of course that stuff is hugely important. And you're right, every country should have that. The Smithsonian also has its own record label, which is mainly based out of the recordings of the old Folkways label in New York in the 1940s. But that continues on. They're still recording every single form of folk music in the United States, and they issue that. Go to their website. You can also get access to most of that stuff, most of the digital versions of that stuff, even for free. Download the PDFs of the liner notes.
It's quite amazing. I've got the, you know, besides the Harry Smith collection, as we know, that's the famous one. I mean, I've got the Sub-Saharan Smithsonian Folkways box. I've got some Yugoslav and Romanian Smithsonian records, you know, originals. Those are part of my own archive. You know, that's my stuff, as you know. But yeah, I mean, I think we also need to maybe look at a stream. And Dewald, it's quite important, you know, also just talking to you because you've been part of an archival process. And yes. You and I both joke that, you know, I joke to you that I'll sooner take a particular Bette Midler album rather than a Diana Krall as an audiophile test. We've joked about that before, you know.
Yeah.
Snob. You know, Dan knows about this. I mean, besides the Michael Garrick that I got the other day, but I mean, and this I got from him. But you know, that's a first press Elton John USA.
Oh wow!
Got on the weekend.
Wow.
You know, it's a great. You know, it's a great album. You know,
Stop bragging.
I'm not a music snob, but the archival stuff, you know, and even the archival stuff. I mean, I've got early electronic stuff here, recordings of Felix Leband, you know, talking electronic stuff that are digital, that have never been released. You know, I want certain things to see the light of day in this country. And
but Stefan, if I might just quickly jump in there, is that, you know, from what I've seen with this project, and I don't want to say this too loudly, but there's been a severe neglect in the curation of albums from big recording labels in the country, where information got lost, tapes got damaged. Just pure neglect, either from not very little interest or lack of funding, which is sad. And when you have a recording and you've got lost information, who was present during the recording sessions, who was the writers, all that, you sit with a sticky situation. How do you publish something like that? Who gets the credit?
Yeah, it's something, and I think maybe we need to look at a show maybe where we address it. You know, is it just a myriad of stuff? You know, and Dan, we need to just get talking more about Ashwita on another show. Keith, you're always gemming this. You know, you're that one connect. You know, and I'm you know, it's just like, but to bring people here together today, and you know, I'm just navigating this StreamYard YouTube thing. You know, doing my own thing, but it's just like there's so much here, but there's also so much that connects. And I'm very, very grateful for James, who's based in Europe, because you know I've always found that you can always most objectively look at your own country when you're outside for a while. Lockdown and the load shedding and the pandemic and me going through a divorce and all of that has got me, you know, like cabin fever at times. You know, but there is something out there, because I still think that beyond, and we've got an election coming up, this country's got so much to offer, and it's definitely gonna play a role. You know, if we all believe in it, and I think all of us that are sitting in this room today, well, on this broadcast, have really contributed in our ways. I mean, you know, Dan, I just remember that night, you know, when I was with Garth and them, and we went to your mum's place, and you were asking about the generator and all of that, and you had some tube amps, and there was load shedding, right? And you sent me that clip of you late at night once Alex had helped you sort out that little thing about what you needed to get between the generator. But that clip of you sitting there, you know, playing your guitar next to Steve Newman. You know, you're also a little bit of a dark horse that's very, very modest about what a wonderful musician you are, you know, and I think that we need to just keep pushing the barriers and, you know, just can I say.
Yeah, brilliant. Yeah, thanks so much. And yeah, so nice to hear from you guys. All your knowledge is incredible. Keith, I'd love to hear more from your, you know, sort of where to find some of these, some of the music that you were talking about earlier. I don't know if there's any particular way you could point out ways to, you know, find some of the electro music you were talking about. I'd love to dig into it.
Well, for one thing, I'll just say that the main international label that's issuing a lot of that stuff now is Awesome Tapes from Africa, which is based in Los Angeles, which is by Brian Shimkovich, who originally started as a reissue label, but now he does a whole sideline in South African and Kenyan electronic music. There's also all the unfortunately, DJ Spoko, who is kind of one of the foundational figures in that whole scene, is no longer with us. And he only really made one EP, which came out on True Panther Records in Brooklyn, New York, while he was alive. you can find copies of that around. It's a 4-track EP. Or 5 tracks maybe, but it's excellent. It's really great recording from 2015. But I can tell you that I don't want to give away too much information about this, but there are 10 unreleased Spoko beats that he gave to a producer in the United States, a very high-end producer who's had Grammy Award nominations and so on. And Spoko gave him these 10 beats just before he died in exchange for being able to stay in the guy's house in New York for a while. So that project is after years, finally coming to fruition, and hopefully next year that stuff should be issued and see the light of day, which is totally unreleased music, which will be like a posthumous collaboration.
Wow, it's exciting. Wow, super. Yeah,
a lot of exciting stuff to come. I mean, and I'm gonna want to end the stream in a couple of minutes if anyone is staying. But I'm going to ask James just to play one more riff on his. If no one minds, because otherwise we've been going nearly 2 hours. I'm going to ask James to play like one little riff off his trumpet, just to end it. And then end stream, if anybody wants to stay behind afterwards to just chat briefly or whatever. But I really want to thank everybody, if this is okay, if it's appropriate. And I'm just going to ask James to like pick the trumpet one last time before we don't want to disturb neighbors. So yeah, just
jeez, I don't know what to play. I'm empty. Yeah, just thank you everybody for sharing everything. It was really beautiful to hear everybody's knowledge, like Dan said, and yeah, what a beautiful conversation and chat. So thank you very much.
yeah, thank you.
I'll play something. Maybe I'll play a little lullaby.
Yeah. Beautiful.
So we in the stream. Just want to say cheers to everybody. Thanks. People that are on the show, please just stay where you are. I'm going to end the stream now to say thanks to everyone. But if anybody wants to just say, I just want to have a little 2-minute conversation, and then we'll cut it. So thanks to the people in the audience that were watching us, and guys, don't go off screen. I'm just ending the stream. We'll still be in the back end of StreamYard.
Thank you.
Chance was just saying hello. I'm just going to say, hey, Chance, good that you were here. All right, I'm ending the stream, but you guys please stay. Cheers, everybody.